Symbolism, Its Meaning and Effect, by Alfred North Whitehead. Quotes. In Symbolism, Its Meaning and Effect, Alfred North Whitehead explores the profound role of symbolism in shaping human thought, experience, and society. Delivered as a series of lectures, this work delves into how symbols influence perception, provide meaning, and serve as the foundation for our understanding of reality. Whitehead examines the various kinds of symbolism, from language to cultural practices, and explains how symbols enable individuals to navigate complex interactions with both their internal consciousness and the external world. By analyzing the intricate relationship between symbols and human experience, Whitehead reveals how symbolism underpins not only communication, but also the broader cultural and philosophical systems that guide society. Quote 1. The slightest survey of different epochs of civilization discloses great differences in their attitude towards symbolism. This statement underscores the variability in how different societies perceive and value symbolism throughout history. It points to a cultural and temporal relativity in the significance and application of symbols, emphasizing that the interpretation and importance of symbolism can shift dramatically from one era to another. Quote 2. Men tried to dispense with symbols as fond things, vainly invented, and concentrated on their direct apprehension of the ultimate facts. This quote captures the shift during the Reformation, away from the use of elaborate symbolism towards a more literal and straightforward means of understanding and interacting with the world. This indicates a broader cultural movement toward skepticism of traditional symbols and an inclination to value direct experience or observation as a more reliable source of truth. Quote 3. Language, written or spoken, is such a symbolism. By categorizing language as a form of symbolism, the author highlights its fundamental role in human communication, where words serve as symbols that do not carry inherent meaning, but acquire significance through the ideas, images, and emotions they evoke in listeners and readers. This perspective on language emphasizes its arbitrary yet indispensable function in society. Quote 4. In some ways, these symbols are different to those of ordinary language, because the manipulation of the algebraical symbols does your reasoning for you, provided that you keep to the algebraic rules. This quotation reflects on the unique nature of mathematical symbolism, particularly in algebra, where symbols do more than represent ideas. They actively engage in the reasoning process. This property sets mathematical symbols apart from ordinary linguistic symbols, which require more active interpretation and don't inherently guide the reasoning process. Quote 5. We say, there is a chair, but what we have seen is the mere colored shape. This quote reflects on the automatic cognitive leap humans often make from seeing a simple visual form to recognizing and labeling it as a specific object. The distinction drawn here highlights the depth of human perceptual symbolism, where mere visual cues are instantly translated into complex understandings based on past experiences and cultural conditioning. Quote 6. Symbolism from our senses to the bodies symbolized is often mistaken. This statement examines the fallibility of sensory perception as a form of symbolism. It acknowledges that our senses can deceive us, often manipulated by external factors like lighting or angles, leading to misinterpretations. The quote suggests a critical view of how direct sensory information is processed, and warns of the ease with which it can lead to errors in perception. Quote 7. In fact, symbolism is very largely concerned with the use of pure sense perceptions in the character of symbols for more primitive elements in our experience. This quote delves into the foundational role of symbolism in human cognition, particularly how basic sensory perceptions are used to symbolize more fundamental aspects of our experiences. It emphasizes the idea that symbolism is not just an artistic or linguistic tool, but is deeply embedded in the way humans interpret and interact with the world at a sensory level. This suggests a broader, more integrated role for symbolism in shaping human experience and knowledge. Quote 8. Direct experience is infallible. What you have experienced, you have experienced. But symbolism is very fallible, in the sense that it may induce actions, feelings, emotions, and beliefs about things which are mere notions without that exemplification in the world which the symbolism leads us to presuppose. This quote contrasts the reliability of direct experiences with the potential deceptiveness of symbolism. It suggests that while our personal experiences are unequivocal and undeniable, the symbols we use to represent or interpret these experiences can lead us astray. The inherent risk with symbolism lies in its capacity to evoke responses or beliefs that may not be grounded in reality, emphasizing the need for critical assessment when interpreting symbols. Quote 9. It is the task of reason to understand and purge the symbols on which humanity depends. This quote emphasizes the critical role of reason in managing and refining the symbols that permeate human thought and culture. It suggests that while symbols are indispensable to communication and understanding, they must be rigorously analyzed and clarified to prevent misunderstandings and errors in thinking. The responsibility lies in using rational thinking to dissect and enhance the symbols that shape human interactions and perceptions. Quote 10. The human mind is functioning symbolically when some components of its experience elicit consciousness, beliefs, emotions, and usages, respecting other components of its experience. This quote delves into the nature of symbolic thinking within the human mind, pointing out that symbolism occurs when certain experiences or perceptions trigger a broader set of beliefs, emotions, or behaviors concerning other aspects of our experience. It highlights the complex interplay between different facets of our consciousness, where symbolic references are not just abstract representations but actively shape and are shaped by our interactions and understanding of the world around us. Quote 11. In this way, we assign to the percipient an activity in the production of its own experience, although that moment of experience, in its character of being that one occasion, is nothing else than the percipient itself. This quote underscores the active role of the perceiver in shaping their own experiences. It articulates the idea that perception is not a passive reception of information, but an active, self-generated process. The perceiver is not merely encountering experiences as external events, but is integral in their creation, blending external stimuli with internal cognition to form what is perceived as reality. Quote 12. A written word may suggest the corresponding spoken word, and that sound may suggest a meaning. This quote elaborates on the process of symbolic interpretation, particularly in language, where a written word can lead to the generation of its spoken form in the mind, which then connects to its established meaning. It captures the layered nature of how humans interact with written language, highlighting the cognitive steps involved from seeing written symbols to understanding their implications in speech and meaning. Quote 13. In such an instance, the written word is a symbol, and its meaning is the spoken word, and the spoken word is a symbol, and its meaning is the dictionary meaning of the word, spoken or written. Here, the statement clarifies the dual symbolic roles played by both written and spoken forms of a word. It delineates a chain of symbolic representation where the written word leads to the spoken form, and the spoken form carries with it an established, often dictionary-defined meaning. This emphasizes the complexity and reflexivity of language as a symbolic system, where multiple layers of meaning can be derived from a single instance of communication. Quote 14. For the poet in his ecstasy, or perhaps agony, of composition, the trees are the symbols, and the words are the meaning. This quote provides an example of how the context and intent of an individual can reverse the usual symbolic relationships. For a poet, the natural elements like trees can become the symbols that inspire the creation of words, where normally words serve as symbols to describe trees. It showcases the flexibility and subjective nature of symbolic associations, especially in creative contexts where the typical roles of symbol and meaning can be inverted based on personal or artistic needs. Quote 15. The most fundamental exemplification of symbolism has already been alluded to in the discussion of the poet and the circumstances which elicit his poetry. We have here a particular instance of the reference of words to things. This quote elaborates on the intrinsic relationship between language and perception, where words are not merely arbitrary signs, but play an active role in shaping our understanding of the world. It underscores how symbolic systems, especially language, are not just tools for communication, but are fundamental to the way individuals interact with and interpret their environment. Quote 16. The projection is an integral part of the situation, quite as original as the sense data. This quote challenges the traditional view that sensations or sense data are primary, and that their projection into our conscious experience is a secondary process. It asserts that the act of projection is as fundamental and original to the perceptual experience as the sensations themselves, indicating a more integrated and dynamic interaction between the individual and their sensory perceptions. Quote 17. Our perception is not confined to universal characters. We do not perceive disembodied color or disembodied extensiveness. We perceive the wall's color and extensiveness. Here, the focus is on the concrete and specific nature of human perception, emphasizing that we do not perceive abstract properties in isolation, but as attributes of distinct, contextualized objects. This quote highlights the embodied and situated nature of perception, where qualities like color and spatial characteristics are always experienced in relation to specific objects within our environment, reinforcing the intertwined relationship between the observer and the observed. Quote 18. Our experience, so far as it is primarily concerned with our direct recognition of a solid world of other things, which are actual in the same sense that we are actual, has three main independent modes, each contributing its share of components to our individual rise into one concrete moment of human experience. This quote outlines the complexity of human experience, suggesting that it is constructed from multiple independent modes of perception, each contributing to our understanding and interaction with the world. This perspective emphasizes the multifaceted nature of how we perceive reality, integrating various sensory and cognitive inputs into a coherent whole that forms our individual experience at any given moment. Quote 19. By symbolic reference, the various actualities disclosed respectively by the two modes are either identified or are at least correlated together as interrelated elements in our environment. This quote encapsulates the essence of symbolic reference in perception, illustrating how different sensory inputs or cognitive modes are integrated to form a coherent understanding of our surroundings. It highlights the crucial role that symbolic reference plays in how we perceive, interpret, and interact with the world, by bridging separate experiences into a unified perception. Quote 20. Symbolic reference may be, in many respects, erroneous. This statement delves into the fallibility of symbolic reference, acknowledging that the process can lead to misconceptions or errors. It underscores that while symbolic references are fundamental to human cognition, they are not infallible and can result in discrepancies between our direct experiences and the interpretations formed through symbolic processing. This perspective is vital for understanding the limits and potentials of human perception and cognition. Quote 21. By way of being as intelligible as possible, we might tacitly assign symbolic reference to mental activity, and thereby avoid some detailed explanation. It is a matter of pure convention as to which of our experiential activities we term mental and which physical. This quote highlights the arbitrary nature of the distinctions we often make between mental and physical processes in the context of symbolic reference. It suggests that what we consider mental versus physical is largely a matter of convention rather than a clear-cut differentiation, indicating a more fluid and interconnected relationship between these aspects of our experiences. Quote 22. Aesop's dog, who was a poor thinker, made a mistake by reason of an erroneous symbolic reference from presentational immediacy to causal efficacy. This quote uses the story of Aesop's dog to illustrate how errors in symbolic reference can lead to misunderstandings or incorrect actions. It underscores the notion that even simple organisms can engage in complex perceptual errors, not necessarily due to a lack of thought, but due to misinterpretations between different types of perceptual experiences. This example provides a vivid illustration of how symbolic references are integral to understanding both truth and error in our interactions with the world. Present quote 23. Presentational immediacy is our immediate perception of the contemporary external world, appearing as an element constitutive of our own experience. In this appearance, the world discloses itself to be a community of actual things, which are actual in the same sense as we are. This quote explains the concept of presentational immediacy as a perceptual process by which we directly experience the external world, emphasizing that this perception is an integrated part of our overall experience. It reveals how our immediate sensory perceptions are not separate from the reality of the external world, but are a direct encounter with it, implying a profound connection between the perceiver and the perceived, where both share the characteristic of actuality. Quote 24. The main facts about presentational immediacy are, I, that the sense data involved depend on the percipient organism and its spatial relations to the perceived organisms. Itrik, that the contemporary world is exhibited as extended and as a plenum of organisms. Iristri, that presentational immediacy is an important factor in the experience of only a few high-grade organisms, and that for the others, it is embryonic or entirely negligible. This quote highlights three central aspects of presentational immediacy. First, it is influenced by the physical relationship between the observer and the observed, showing how perception is spatially contextual. Second, it portrays the world as a full, continuous collection of interrelated entities, suggesting a rich, interconnected reality. Lastly, it points out that presentational immediacy is not uniformly experienced across all organisms, but is particularly significant in more complex beings, indicating that the depth of perceptual awareness varies significantly among different types of organisms. The quote 25. Thus, objectification itself is abstraction, since no actual thing is objectified in its formal completeness. Abstraction expresses nature's mode of interaction and is not merely mental. This quote highlights the concept of objectification as a form of abstraction that is essential in understanding how we perceive and interact with the world around us. It emphasizes that objectification, while a mental process, mirrors the inherent interactions within nature itself, suggesting a deeper, almost intrinsic connection between our cognitive processes and the natural world. Quote 26. This lecture has maintained the doctrine of a direct experience of an external world. Here, the emphasis is on the philosophical stance that our experiences of the world are direct and not merely constructs of the mind. This assertion supports the idea that our sensory perceptions connect us immediately with the external reality, challenging views that might argue our perceptions are solely mental constructs without real-world counterparts. Quote 27. In inquiring about any one individual, we must ask how other individuals enter objectively into the unity of its own experience. This quote delves into the interconnectivity of experiences, suggesting that understanding an individual requires considering how other entities influence and are incorporated into that individual's experience. It speaks to a broader philosophical inquiry into the nature of existence, where the focus is on the relational aspects of being and the synthesis of experiences across different entities. Quote 28. It is the thesis of this work that human symbolism has its origin in the symbolic interplay between two distinct modes of direct perception of the external world. This quote introduces the fundamental argument of the work, which posits that the origins of human symbolism stem from the interaction between two different ways we directly perceive the external world. This interaction between diverse perceptual modes not only enriches our understanding, but also forms the basis for the symbolic frameworks we use to interpret and navigate reality. Quote 29. The symbolic reference leads to a transference of emotion, purpose, and belief, which cannot be justified by an intellectual comparison of the direct information derived from the two schemes. Here, the statement delves into the complexities of symbolic references, pointing out that they evoke emotional, purposeful, and belief-oriented responses that often go beyond what can be logically deduced from the information available through direct perception. This suggests that symbolic references work on a deeper, perhaps more instinctual level, influencing our thoughts and actions in ways that rational analysis alone might not fully explain. Quote 30. The phrase stubborn fact exactly expresses the popular apprehension of this characteristic. Its primary phase, from which each actual thing arises, is the stubborn fact which underlies its existence. This quote emphasizes the notion of stubborn facts as foundational elements from which reality is constructed, asserting that each actual thing is based on unyielding truths or realities that persist regardless of subjective perception or philosophical debate. This perspective suggests a tangible, underlying layer to existence that is both undeniable and essential to the formation of actual entities. Quote 31. The school of transcendental idealists, derived from Kant, admit that causal efficacy is a factor in the phenomenal world, but hold that it does not belong to the sheer data presupposed in perception. Here, the focus is on the Kantian view of causal efficacy as a conceptual rather than perceptual reality, positing that our understanding of cause and effect is shaped not by direct sensory data, but by the intellectual frameworks we impose upon these data. This philosophical stance challenges the idea that causal connections are immediately apparent in the raw sensory information we receive, suggesting instead that they are interpretations formed by the mind. Quote 32. There is nothing which simply happens. Such a belief is the baseless doctrine of time as pure succession. This statement contests the notion that events just occur in a straightforward, sequential manner without underlying connections or contexts. It criticizes the idea of pure succession in time as an oversimplification that ignores the complex interdependencies and conformations that define reality, proposing instead that every event is part of a broader, interrelated continuum influenced by past events and conditions. Quote 33. Universality of truth arises from the universality of relativity, whereby every particular actual thing lays upon the universe the obligation of conforming to it. This quote suggests that truths are universal because they stem from the universal nature of relationships within the universe, where every entity influences and shapes the reality around it. It presents a perspective where individual entities are not isolated but inherently connected, each imposing its own form of order or influence on the overall structure of reality. Quote 34. The logical difficulties attending the direct perception of causal efficacy have been shown to depend on the sheer assumption that time is merely the generic notion of pure succession. This quote criticizes the oversimplification of time as just a sequence of events, which undermines the understanding of causal relationships. By challenging this assumption, the text argues for a more nuanced view of time that incorporates the interconnectedness and consequential nature of events, allowing for a deeper appreciation of how things influence one another across time. Quote 35. My point is that this confirmation of present fact to immediate past is more prominent both in apparent behavior and in consciousness when the organism is low-grade. Here, the discussion focuses on the idea that simpler organisms demonstrate a more pronounced alignment between their current actions and their immediate past conditions. This observation suggests that even in less complex beings, the awareness of causality is inherent and crucial for survival and interaction with their environment, emphasizing a fundamental aspect of all living systems regardless of their complexity. Quote 36. Ultimately, all observation, scientific or popular, consists in the determination of the spatial relation of the bodily organs of the observer to the location of projected sense data. This quote encapsulates the essence of how we perceive and interact with our environment, emphasizing that our observations are fundamentally about understanding the spatial relationships between ourselves and the elements around us. It highlights the inherent connection between our physical position and how we process sensory information, providing a foundational insight into the mechanics of perception. Quote 37. But for all their vagueness, for all their lack of definition, these controlling presences, these sources of power, these things with an inner life, with their own richness of content, these beings, with the destiny of the world hidden in their natures, are what we want to know about. This quote delves into the human fascination with the undefined yet influential aspects of our experiences. It points out that despite their elusive and often indeterminate nature, these vague elements that control or influence events hold a significant interest because they are perceived as powerful and central to the unfolding of events around us. The statement underscores a deep human desire to understand and connect with these forces, which are often sensed rather than concretely known. Quote 38. The bonds of causal efficacy arise from without us. They disclose the character of the world from which we issue, an inescapable condition round which we shape ourselves. Here, the discussion focuses on the concept of causal efficacy as an external force that shapes our understanding and interaction with the world. It suggests that these causal relationships are not just perceptions but are actual conditions that we must navigate and respond to, thus shaping our actions and our understanding of our place within the broader context of existence. This perspective frames human experience as deeply interconnected with the external world, where our actions and reactions are continually influenced by the forces that we perceive around us. Quote 39. It plays a dominant part in the way in which all higher organisms conduct their lives. It is the cause of progress and the cause of error. This quote underscores the central role of symbolism in the lives of higher organisms, influencing both their evolutionary advancements and their mistakes. Symbolism, as a cognitive faculty, allows organisms to interpret and react to their environments in complex ways, but it also introduces the potential for misinterpretation and error. This dual nature of symbolism reflects its profound impact on the development and behavior of sophisticated life forms. Quote 40. The higher animals have gained a faculty of great power, by means of which they can define with some accuracy those distant features in the immediate world by which their future lives are to be determined. This statement highlights the evolutionary advantage that higher animals have developed, the ability to perceive and interpret distant or future implications of their current environment. This faculty enhances survival by allowing these organisms to anticipate and prepare for potential scenarios, illustrating the adaptive value of symbolic cognition in navigating complex environments. Quote 41. But this faculty is not infallible, and the risks are commensurate with its importance. Here, the text acknowledges the fallibility of the symbolic faculties that higher organisms possess. While these abilities are powerful and crucial for survival and progression, they are not without risks. The potential for error can lead to significant consequences, making the symbolic capability a double-edged sword in the evolutionary toolkit of these organisms. This quote underscores the balance between the benefits and risks inherent in the development of complex cognitive abilities. Quote 42. The perception of conformation to realities in the environment is the primitive element in our external experience. This quote highlights the foundational aspect of perception, which is the ability to conform to and understand the realities presented by the environment. This fundamental perceptual skill forms the basis of how organisms, particularly humans, interact with and respond to their surroundings, reflecting an inherent drive to align internal states with external realities. Quote 43. The contrast between the comparative emptiness of presentational immediacy and the deep significance disclosed by causal efficacy is at the root of the pathos which haunts the world. This statement reflects on the profound emotional impact resulting from understanding the world through two different perceptual modes: presentational immediacy, which often feels shallow because it only concerns the surface appearances, and causal efficacy, which delves deeper into the causes and effects behind these appearances. The disparity between these perspectives adds a layer of complexity and emotion to human experience, underscoring the richer, often more troubling insights gained from recognizing underlying causes. Quote 44. First, the causal side of experience is dominating. Then, the sense presentation gains in subtlety. Here, the development of perception is described as initially dominated by an understanding of causal relationships, which then becomes enriched by more detailed and nuanced sensory experiences. This progression from a simplistic to a more complex appreciation of the world mirrors the cognitive and perceptual development in individuals and species, suggesting a maturation of awareness that enhances survival and adaptation. Symbolism, its meaning and effect, invites readers to reflect on the pervasive, yet often overlooked influence of symbols in everyday life. Whitehead highlights that the effective use of symbols is essential for understanding reality and ensuring the cohesion of social structures. Yet, symbols can also mislead and distort if their meanings are not continuously scrutinized and revised. Ultimately, Whitehead's work is a reminder of the need to balance reverence for established symbols with a willingness to adapt and reinterpret them in light of new experiences and understanding, enabling human thought to evolve and flourish.
Curious to dive into the mind of Alfred North Whitehead? With StudyLab Pro's Book GPT, it's possible. Ask questions, explore themes, and discover the depths of symbolism, its meaning and effect, in an entirely new way. Start your conversation now by clicking on our logo, and if you're hungry for more educational content, subscribe to our channel to keep discovering, learning, and growing. Want more than just videos? Click on our logo now to join us on our platform for multiple-choice tests, in-depth content, and tools to help you ace your studies. Get started now.